If you all have been around on the channel for a while, you all know how much I love Stasis builds. Unfortunately, as time went on, Stasis kept getting power crept over and over again, but thankfully with this season, there is a lot of good stuff going for it. I'm sure this build is coming at no surprise, but I wanted to switch things up and not actually use Prismatic. As you read from the title, this is going to be a pure Stasis build, and I 100% think this build can compete with some of the best builds that we have in the game. Now, if you all would like to see a Prismatic version of this setup, definitely be sure to let me know. I've been trying to gather all the pieces to put that puzzle together, and I specifically wanted to wait for this build so I could have all of the artifact perks unlocked. The artifact is going to play a very vital part into this build, and I know that can throw some people off, so if you like to see a build that doesn't take advantage of any artifacts at all, be sure to check out my previous video, and you can gain your super sometimes faster than your grenade charge. But as a quick rundown, with this build, you're going to buff your stasis turrets while also having unlimited abilities, that being your grenade, melee, and class ability, and you can use it both passively and aggressively. This build is a ton of fun and very effective and has potential to get better, which we'll talk about later in the video. So I hope you all can enjoy. Thank you for clicking on the video, and if you all do find it useful, consider subscribing and dropping a like. All of the support really does go a long way, and I truly appreciate it from each and every one of you. But without further ado, let's jump into the new pure Stasis Warlock build. All right, first things first, we need to take a look at our new exotic, because this is going to be the core of how this build is going to work. This is going to be the rime-coat remnant. This has the exotic perk Bleak Domain. Your Bleak Watcher turrets are enhanced with an extended range and are surrounded by stasis crystals and a storm. While standing in the storm, you are granted icicles over time. Icicles activate when you fire weapons, applying slow to targets they hit. So this exotic is honestly really cool. It's one of my favorite exotics in the game now. You basically just make a giant fort around your stasis turret, alongside also buffing the range of the stasis turret, which is super nice. I'm gonna be completely honest, I've been calling this just a Fortnite wall. You literally can just throw this. You're gonna have this giant area that you can either use aggressively or defensively. And what I mean by that is that you can actually throw the Bleak Watcher at enemies. The stasis crystals that spawn will freeze all the enemies around it, then you can shatter all the crystals to do a ton of damage. Then the turret can just sit there, slow enemies, and eventually it will spawn stasis crystals again. If the turret lives long enough, it will form the crystals when you throw it, but as time goes on, if all the crystals are broke, it will just form a new set of crystals. It's actually very, very sick. But now you can also use this exotic piece defensively, or trying to hold an area down, say in something like Onslaught. You can throw this at your feet or just nearby. You're going to have the stasis crystals to basically give you cover, and then you will also have the buff stasis turret that's slowing enemies. But if you're standing in it with your stasis turret, you're going to be building these icicles up, and then every single time you shoot an enemy, you're going to apply slow to the target. If you're pairing this with other stasis based things, something like chill clip or headstone, this actually works very, very well together, and you can just slow alongside your stasis turret, and you become this freezing slow just army out there, alongside also providing you that additional cover. This exotic is truly one of a kind, and it is very, very strong. But since we were just talking about shooting, let's actually dive into some of the weapons. I know I normally do this later in the video, but weapons are extremely important with this build. As a TLDR, make sure you have a weapon with headstone, or make sure you have a weapon with chill clip. These are going to play heavily into our synergies, which we'll talk about more in depth here later, and it will even play into some of the artifact perks. Now, if you want one specific weapon recommendation, and if you have it, Wicked Implement is just by far going to be the best weapon. I will say this does get a lot more mileage out of higher end content, say something like GMs. However, it is still very good in low end content as well. Now, if you want to swap things up and just run something like a bold endings with demo headstone, this works extremely well with this build as well. But if you don't want to swap things up, just run Wicked Implement. It is very, very good with this build. This is going to have the exotic perk Creeping Attrition. Rapidly landed precision hits cause targets to become slow. Then it also has Tithing Harvest. While Creeping Attrition is active, destroying stasis crystals or landing precision final blows creates a stasis shard. The stasis shard returns to you, and collecting stasis shards refills the magazine. And it also has the catalyst where it grants you headstone, and then also collecting stasis shards gradually overflows the magazine. So obviously this exotic has a lot going on for it, and it's heavily based around playing with the stasis crystals. The good part is this weapon does have headstone. If you have the catalyst to generate stasis crystals, the stasis crystals will track to you, and these stasis crystals will also play into our subclass, which is very, very nice. And then the really cool part, since you are applying slow with Creeping Attrition, if you're standing in your Bleak Watcher, you're also going to be applying slow with the ice needles that you spawn, and you can freeze enemies extremely quick with just your weapon, and that's not even talking about the Bleak Watcher also shooting them. So you can basically just freeze down an entire battlefield, and again, you just become this two-man army with your stasis turret. I genuinely believe Wicked Implement was made for this exact build because it is just ridiculously strong. Now, for the other weapons, I just like to run something like an empty vessel because I am going to be taking advantage of some grenade launcher artifact perks. In reality, both of these are up to you. Just run whatever is the current DPS meta, and then whatever special weapon you like to run. Wicked Implement, or just a weapon with headstone or choke clip, is what you need to run. Wicked Implement being the SSS plus tier by far. We've talked a lot about the subclass synergies. Let's actually dive into what these actually are. Well, starting off, obviously we need to run Bleak Watcher. So this is going to let you hold, consume your grenade, and then you can throw your stasis turret. That one's pretty self-explanatory. But next up, we're going to be running Glacial Harvest. So freezing targets create stasis shards around the frozen targets. Higher tier combatants create more shards. While Glacial Harvest is equipped, picking up stasis shards grants you stacks of frost armor. So obviously we were just talking about how stasis shards are extremely important for Wicked Implement, so you can overflow the magazine, but this also lets you further play into those stasis shards. You're going to make more, and then every time you pick the stasis shards up, regardless of it being the ones that track to you with Wicked Implement or the ones that you just pick up laying on the ground, it's going to grant you frost armor. And on top of that, it also heals you a very small amount. It's nothing crazy, but it is a nice little benefit to have if you do need to just get some extra health and there are a ton of shards on the ground, because you will be making a ton of shards with this build. And then the other benefit of stasis shards is that it also regenerates your melee energy when you pick one up, and your melee is also going to play a pretty important part into this build. Now for your abilities, obviously this isn't prismatic, so you gotta take Penumbral Blast. Your grenade doesn't matter because you're going to have the base cooldown of the Bleak Watcher turret, and then I like to run a Healing Rift for survivability. You can throw your Healing Rift in your Bleak Watcher domain. Not only are you having the walls up, the slow everything, you now also can heal. It is very, very strong, and you're going to be able to spam your class ability a lot as well with some of our artifact perks. Now unfortunately for the super, Winter's Wrath is still really not the greatest super in the game. It's arguably probably the worst super in the game. Overall though, it's still okay for ad clear, or if you're doing something like a GM and you need to get a res, you can obviously just freeze everything, have the damage reduction, go get the res. So it has some uses. Just know this isn't going to be some crazy DPS super though. It's more so a panic super just to stay alive and get your teammates up, which is obviously beneficial. It's just, you know, obviously not a golden gun or a nova bomb or something of the sort. But now for the fragments, we're going to be taking Whisper of Fissures. So this is going to increase the damage and size of the burst of stasis when you destroy a stasis crystal or defeat a frozen target. Obviously the whole theme of this build is to freeze everything, and also since Wicked Implement can have headstone, you're just going to be doing more damage on all these frozen targets and the stasis crystals. And not to mention, also remember your rime-coat remnant can also make stasis crystals. Now your next fragment is going to be Whisper of Rending, so primary ammo weapons to increase damage to stasis crystals and frozen targets. Since we're going to be freezing enemies all the time and heavily playing into Wicked Implement, now it's just going to be doing more damage. On top of that, this also does allow you to do more damage to stasis crystals. So with something like Wicked Implement, you can now one-shot the headstone crystals you make, which makes the ad clear go up by so much. And then obviously you can also one-shot the crystals that the Bleak domain makes. And the reason you want to be able to one-shot all of these crystals is because we're going to be running Whisper of Shards. So shattering a stasis crystal temporarily boosts your grenade recharge rate. Shattering additional stasis crystals increases the duration of this benefit. So what's really cool is, since obviously we're going to have stasis crystals literally everywhere with this build, we're always going to have max stacks with this, which is going to grant us a lot of grenade regen, so we can throw Bleak Watchers over and over. If you have your Bleak Watcher up on the battlefield with max stacks of Whisper of Shards, you will actually get your grenade back in time before the original stasis turret runs out. And the thing that really helps out with that is actually going to be Whisper of Endurance. So slow that you apply to targets last longer. For those abilities that linger, the duration will also increase. So this is buffing your slow just to make it last longer. But what's really cool is, since Bleak Watcher is an ability, it will actually make the turret last longer than it normally lasts. This is going to really help out with chaining additional turrets over and over again, and you can make sure you always have one on the battlefield. And the main benefit of running Prismatic with this build is the fact that you can get Devour and you can just spam stasis turrets all around. But with this specific setup, you can have two pretty much out on the battlefield pretty regularly. But even if you don't want to spam them over and over again, because let's be honest, you don't really need to spam them, you will for sure have one up literally all the time if you do play around your cooldowns correctly. Now I do want to make a small little recommendation here. If you don't want to run Whisper of Endurance, because you don't really need to, the stasis turret already lasts long enough, you can already spam them enough, you can opt in to take something like Whisper of Rime, so you can increase your frost armor stacks in the maximum count. This will just overall increase your survivability. But if I'm being completely honest, you don't really need it too much if you are playing around your Healing Rift and your Bleak domain, because you're already going to have enough, you know, protection and healing coming from those two things, and you already are are also going to have the frost armor stacks just from the base glacial harvest, which is still granting you damage reduction, just not as much as if you do have whisper bomb. It's totally up to you. In my playtest, I think Durance was better though. But now let's jump into the artifact, and I'm going to be honest here, this is basically a subclass in itself with everything going on for it. But first things first, let's just talk about Wall with Frost. So while you have frost armor, your stasis weapons are just going to reload faster. You don't really have to reload Wicked Implement too much because of its catalyst that it does have, and also the perk that just reloads the gun. But if you ever in a sticky situation where you do need to reload, and this does come up quite often, you do actually get some increased reload speed for Wicked Implement, which is nice. Or obviously if you're running any other stasis weapon, say something like a stasis heavy, you also get the benefit of that reload speed, which is great. Now next up is just wind chill. So rapid stasis precision hits will actually grant you frost armor. So since we're going to be obviously very easily getting rapid precision hits with the implement, we're just going to get frost armor. Again, picking up all the stasis shards will also grant you frost armor, so you pretty much at max frost armor at all times, which is just very strong for your survivability. Now next up is actually going to be crystalline converter. Now this is going to make it so when you gather stasis shards, you're basically going to build up a bunch of energy, and then you can throw your stasis melee out and it will spawn stasis crystals. This is what I was talking about when I said your melee is going to play a pretty important part with this build, because your predominant blast is honestly pretty solid. It can freeze enemies, but now you're going to make stasis crystals for even more ad clear. Then next up is going to be armor of airmen. So while you have frost armor active, when you get critical health, you'll just release a freezing burst. This is nice for your survivability. Obviously with everything going on, we're probably going to be sitting back a lot, but if an enemy comes up, it melees you, you now can just freeze them while standing beside your turret, which is pretty sick. And then Held the Storm, so shattering stasis crystals releases shards of ice that slow targets. This is great because obviously we're going to be making a ton of crystals with this build between Wicked Implement and rime-coat remnant, so we're going to be able just to release these slowing shards to do even more. And then I like to run brain freeze, so whenever we freeze combatant, it will actually release a slowing fog around that frozen combatant. It basically is a mini dust field grenade, if I'm being completely honest, and all you have to do is just freeze the target, and obviously everything in this build freezes targets, so this is pretty much active all the time. And then severed cold, so whenever you pick up a stasis shard, it's going to grant you class ability energy. This one is honestly extremely important, and if you want to run something like kinetic impacts, I would honestly swap out brain freeze for it, because the way this is going to work now is all those shards that we've been talking about making, not only is it granted the predominant blast energy, we now also get rift energy. So with this just means now we can spam our rift, we can spam our melee, which is also being buffed with the other artifact perks, and of course with everything else in the build, we can spam our grenade to just lock down areas with our Bleak Watcher. That's all the main artifact perks that play into this. I would mention anti-barrier scout rifle, but unfortunately right now it is currently bugged, it seems like, for Wicked Implement. I hope Bungie sees this and fixes it as fast as possible, because if this does end up working with the Wicked Implement, you're going to be able to have all 3 champion mods with this, because it's just going to be barrier and then slow stuns overload and shattering a frozen target's unstoppable, and it's going to be one of the strongest weapons in the game. But right now it unfortunately is bugged and doesn't seem to work, but that is where this build could get better in the future. And then just as an honorable mention, something like a custom reload is nice, so you can weaken enemies. Running just a special grenade launcher, which is why I have an empty vessel equipped, is just great for debuffing things, but obviously that's not a core part to the build like everything else is. But now for stats, definitely go with 100 resilience to get 30% damage reduction, 100 discipline so you can spam your Bleak Watcher as much as possible, and then I like to play into recovery just so I can get my healing rift back a lot, since this is going to be a very crucial part to your survivability. And then on top of that, just go into strength if you have anything left over. If you want to focus more in strength to play around your predominant blast more, you totally can do so. It's 100% up to you. I just prefer to have that little extra bit of survivability. Now for the armor mods, this is what I'm running if you would like to copy it down. First off, starting with the helmet, I do run a harmonic siphon, so whenever I get rapid stasis weapon final blows, I can make orbs of power. This is great because now Wicked Implement is not only making stasis shards, but they're also making orbs, and they kind of perform the same way a little bit. Next up is going to be heavy ammo finder, just so I can make more heavy ammo with my Wicked Implement. This does work more if you are running an exotic primary weapon, so this is great. And then also with heavy ammo scout, the heavy ammo I make with the ammo finder, I make for my team. The reason you don't really need to run anything else is because Dynamo you can run because you can use your class ability a lot to get your super, but you don't really need your super that often because your base kit is honestly stronger than your super, and then you're not getting kills with the ashes to assets. So a lot of the other mods here don't really matter too much. That's why I opted in just to make ammo for my team, since this is a very team support oriented build in the first place, so this is great to play into that. Now for your arms, I'd like to run a harmonic loader, kind of like I was saying earlier with the artifact perk, you do have to reload the wicked implement sometimes, so this is just great to have. Pairing that with the artifact perk, you can just speed reload the thing. If you don't want to take this and you want to take something else, I totally get it. You can run something like momentum transfers. When you cause damage to the grenade, you get melee energy. This would be great as well, and that's going to be in a very similar vein to bolstering detonation. So when we cause damage with our grenade, we will actually get class ability energy. Now, since this is specifically damage, the stasis turret you make will actually proc these. So the stasis turret is constantly shooting, gonna constantly give your class ability energy back when it's off its little cooldown, and it's just a great mod to have in this build. Now, I also like to run a grenade kickstart, so whenever I throw my grenade, I will get energy back based on the amount of armor chart stacks I have, and we're pretty much going to be at max armor chart stacks at all times, so you can always expect to have 3 charges of this, and it just lets you help you spam that grenade even more. Now, for your chest piece, always go with resistant mods just based on the content that you're doing. And then for the boots, I do like to run a recuperation, so whenever I pick an orb up, I will get health. I also like to run an innervation, so whenever I pick an orb up, I will get grenade energy. With the stasis shards provided in this build, it is going to grant you class ability and melee, and also heal you a little bit. But now the orbs you pick up are going to heal you a little bit, and also grant you grenade energy. So you're healing and getting all ability energy from all these little pickups that you're making. And then finally, I like to run an elemental charge with the boots, so whenever you pick up a elemental pickup, so specifically our stasis shards in this, it's actually going to grant you an armor charge. Since we can make so many stasis shards with this build, I think picking up 4 it will actually grant you an armor charge, and then obviously picking up orbs will also grant you an armor charge. So you should always prioritize picking orbs up, always prioritize picking the stasis shards up, because not only are you getting health and ability energy, but you can now also gain armor charge, which will play into grenade kickstart to spam the grenades even more. And then finally, for the class item, I do like to run a bomber, so whenever I use my class ability, I get grenade energy. This obviously is going to synergize with bolstering detonation. The grenades hit grant you class ability, and now the class ability placement grants you grenade. And you want to do these a lot at the same time anyway, because you want to have the bleak domain and the rift together, so you become very tanky. Then next up is just powerful attraction, so I can pick up all the orbs around me whenever I use my class ability. This is great to have since orbs obviously are a pretty vital part of this build. And then distribution, so this will reduce all my ability cooldowns when I use my class ability near targets. This is great again because you want to spam all 3 of your abilities, because they all matter quite a lot, and you're going to be able to freeze everything with all this put together. And then finally, for the most important part of the build, this is the transmog I'm running. I was initially going for like a very, I guess, really frost heavy theme, but then I landed on this, like, I guess, Frost Plague Doctor fantasy thing. I think it actually turned out looking pretty sick. Obviously, it's taking advantage of some of the new Eververse armor, the new exotic chest piece, and I'm pretty sure this is the Osmiomancy bond that pairs with the gloves, which is pretty fitting because most of the time you ran Osmiomancy with this build, but now we're swapping it up with the new chest piece. So I figured it'd be nice to pay homage to the original OG build for this, but I genuinely do believe this is better than the Osmiomancy build now, but that doesn't mean we still can't take advantage of some of the drip that it have that build. So if you want to make your Warlock look like this, definitely be sure to copy it down. But all right, that is going to do it all for me for this build. Let me know what you all think about it in the comments below. Have you tried the new exotic chest piece out? Have you even gotten any of the new exotics yet? Like I said in the beginning, this is honestly a super fun exotic. I love the playstyle it provides, from either being aggressive or defensive, however you want to use it. You can obviously also interchange it from whatever you're doing in the game as well. And the synergies that come along with everything from the subclass, artifact perk, your weapons, it just is so nice. This is definitely one of those builds I would recommend saving in a loadout slot for harder end content, because I can definitely see myself using this a ton in the future. Anyway though, I wish you all the best of luck on putting this build together for yourself. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great day. Peace.